Come and get started on a new mission, a new direction, a new intention. Welcome to 5.8G Alive at Connections 50 Plus. I am Terry-Ann Joseph Brathwaite.
And I am Jennifer Gibbons Joseph, catering to all your prospects in the third act of life.
Economic well-being, social gratification, personal fulfillment.
Join us on Wednesday at 6 p.m. on Connections 50 Plus Facebook page, YouTube channel,
and on Gael the Caribbean.
Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. How are you? It is Wednesday, 21st. It is 6 o'clock. And as I always say, you're on Gael the channel across the Caribbean. You're on Facebook or you're on YouTube. So it's 5.8G Alive. Welcome. I'm Terry-Ann Joseph Brathwaite, one of the co-creators of Connections 50 Plus. And with me,
I am Jennifer Gibbons Joseph, as usual. We are the co-creator of Connections 50 Plus. Welcome and good evening to you all.
Yes, Jennifer, today we have a wonderful guest and a wonderful show, but we want to take some time to just share with you and say thank you. I mean, we had our sex and sexual health forum, but it just exceeded all expectations. We had our group of men and women participate. Everybody learned. There was so much fun. And Onika Henry, you are so knowledgeable. So much good advice. I mean,
Terry, and I totally agree. It was a fantastic experience. You know, I posted, and I would want you all to check on our Facebook page. You know, just a few of the feedback. We didn't give you audio because we don't want to reveal that, but the feedback.
A lot of people said, you all are so brave, but you all are on the cutting edge. You don't mask things. And we say it all the time. Our Connections 50 Plus, we're serious about having our best lives on the in this age. We're in the 21st century, we're in 2021. There's so much that we can do. We have health. And Jennifer, the thing about it is we're continuing in that vein today.
Yeah.
Because our topic is looking at daughters and fathers. Jennifer, so often we talk about boys and single mothers and all kinds of stuff. And when in relationships we have trouble, we always focus on the man and the issue. But our guest today really has done a lot of work in counseling. So we're talking about fathers and daughters. And we're talking equally about the father. So men, you're a father. We're talking to you. Woman, you're a daughter. We're talking to you.
Yes.
So relax yourselves and take in this in tune session. It's fathers and daughters and their relationship.
Yes.
Okay, so everyone, this afternoon, we are in tune. And as Jennifer and I just said, we are continuing our discussion. We've gotten such fantastic feedback from you on this intense discussion on relationships. And today we are happy to have another one of the significant contributors to keeping us all in line in Trinidad and Tobago, in Canada, across the world. This is Ian Jeffers. Okay, many of you who may have worked with him if you've worked in some of the major companies in Trinidad as an organizational change agent, you may have worked with him personally or individually with his family practice. So Ian, welcome to 5.8G Alive.
Yeah, it's I suppose I can do like everybody else and say I'm glad to be here.
Yes, you are. Okay, so today we are taking a view. We were having a discussion. Now, Ian and I are old friends, and in many ways, he's responsible for both the positives and negatives about me. So own that. And we were talking just last week about the issue of daughters and fathers and daughters. You know, a lot of times we look at men and boys and we think all the social issues are around men and boys. And Ian, you raised a significant point to me. So I want to start with the discussion by asking you, what is this father-daughter relationship and what does it do for the development of both parties?
Well, I think, I hear you say that the relationship about father and son, and that is what, that's the most common relationship that is referred to, and, in the work that we do, and we do work with young men, father absence and the role of the father is a big thing, the role of the man in the family. We actually have a topic that we do with that. And we don't pay enough attention, I think, to the relationship between father and daughter, because, I think something that we miss is, and most men would admit it, but some when you have a daughter comes into your life, and it's a different kind of a feeling that you get, everything that has to do with protection and making sure that, this, nothing happens to this one, all that begins to rise up, sometimes consciously and sometimes even unconsciously, because the boys could always, you could always toughen them up. But what do I do with this girl here? And so you often find, and I'm sure most of us have come across that sometimes, like you go talk to your mother, about that. And that usually, that you go talk to your mother about is usually the kind of woman things, like girl things, Men hardly ever sit down and talk to their girl children about
emotions.
Like what here's what
emotions.
Right now, And, of course, one thing they're always good at is that I ain't like that one, whoever that boy is, what I mean? Because, and for whatever reason, sometimes they see themselves in that one there right now, and they don't want that around their daughter. You know what I mean? So there's a lot of that happens on an everyday basis, but we never really sat back and said, like, what is this relationship that's developing between father and daughter? And daughters pay a different kind of attention to relationships around it. Don't ask me why, but they actually see them watching and sensing and feeling, and that's not a stereotype. It's real, and then adolescence comes. When your little girl starts to change.
Yeah, she's becoming a woman. She's no longer an innocent little one, and other men are paying attention to her.
That is quite a thing, and men don't talk about that a lot, but the protector role becomes very, very more pronounced at that point in time. And even then, with the protector role, there's a lot of not talking to your daughter, but telling the significant other, wife, girlfriend, whatever it is.
That's the message.
You better talk to that girl, because so and hardly ever they say, well, you talk to her, because and so that doesn't happen. But the presence, the male presence in the daughter's life is palpable, because the daughter also sees the male as a protector most of the time. And we talk a lot about father absence when fathers are not around for boys. And we don't talk a lot about father absence when father is not around for the girls.
Ian, what happens when fathers don't have those conversations with their daughters, when they avoid and leave it to your mother?
Yeah, it's for me, in my experience, it's a timeliness thing. Those conversations are never really held, certainly, well, I should say never, because some men do it, with a degree of sensitivity in which it needs to be held. And men which is why you go talk to your daughter. You know, so it's when the conversations do happen, it's usually at some kind of a crisis point later on down the road, you know, when something major happens. And then, you know, who knows where the conversation is going after that, you know.
When there's trauma in the girl or the young woman's life and daddy has to rescue.
Protect, especially, as well, you know. Protect and rescue, you know, and then you know, assert himself and take charge and this kind of thing, you know. And sometimes that isn't done in a way that's appreciated, because, you know, now you come with all of this, you know what I mean? So it creates all those kinds of conflicts, you know. But protection is a big thing, you know, and children like to feel protected, you know.
If we come to we could talk about what happens with children and so on, but let me bring that daughter into adulthood. Let me bring that daughter into getting ready to come on to her third act stage. And she may not have had a broad range of communications with a father, any father. If there was a father, it may have been a bad communication, or if there was no father at all. We see all kinds of issues with people not wanting to leave the second act stage and coming on to the third act into your 50s and 80s. Are some of the issues that we find at this time rooted back into issues around father-daughter?
Oh yeah, oh yeah. The daughter now becomes the protector.
Of whom? The father?
The father, yeah. You know, the sort of you know, especially, and I find especially when there are kind of health issues or other kinds of issues that because by now the daughter is now, you know, well developed, you know, like professional perhaps, you know, knows about things, you know what I mean, and with a depth of knowledge and an understanding that fathers are actually out of touch with, or whatever, and then she begins to say things all of a sudden like no, that's not how that's going to go. Let me tell you how this is going to go. So the child has become the father, the mother of the man, and that is you know, some men submit to that. And some men sort of passively resist that, and some of them just won't have it. And then there's a whole lot of conflict. And sometimes, you know, like you get along, and then there are these basic issues that, like, daughter feels, especially if they feel very strongly about it, you know, and father persists, you know, in whatever. Then the relationship gets strained, but it's never broken, interestingly enough.
Are these tensions usually overt, or are they like underlying tensions that cause other kinds of difficulties?
Well, I don't know what you mean by overt. You mean that everybody's going to see it?
In the father and the daughter, or within a family?
No. My experience is that everybody doesn't see it. You know, it's you know, because there still is that respect in there. It's just like who, you know, it's almost the sort of dominant protective male is now struggling with the maybe highly experienced, well-educated woman who knows things and successful herself in her own right, you know, and not sort of taking the advice that she normally would take because she has her own opinion, and guess what? She's right. You know, and there is that struggle, you know. So it's a challenge, I think, for both, for both the father and the daughter, you know. And I could think of some instances, certainly in the counseling experience, where there's this tremendous amount of love that's being shared between father and daughter, but like the tension around certain kinds of issues, especially, what's going to happen with my life now as I'm reaching this age and stage where I'm not as connected as I used to be, and I'm no longer the great protector. That's a difficult stage for men, and they resist it with every little bit of strategy and tactics that they have, only to find that they still are not in charge anymore, and that's difficult for them.
And how, because I can imagine you could have on this that stage, because it's 50 to 80, you could have a daughter on we have this stage in 3 stages. There's the 50 to 60, the 60 to 70, and the 70 to 80. You can have a daughter going through change, whether it's leaving career, children are growing up, thinking about her own future, and so on the first part of the stage. And you may have a father on the third part of the stage, probably still vibrant or not, or seeing failing health, all kinds of things. How does that tension then, or does it get in the way of each as an individual being able to live their best life? How does it keep them back?
Well, I think it becomes difficult. The conversations that become difficult are the conversations as to how are you going to live your life at this point, at this stage of your life. Who's protecting who now? And when you're in that third stage, as you put it, you're not as quick as you used to be. So what happens is you may you agree with things, and then think it over and come back and say, I ain't doing that again. After giving it some serious thought, including the man thought that says, oh, it's telling me what to do, and there is and so it sometimes creates tensions that are, literally manufactured the next day. So, a daughter, and hear that a lot, a daughter may find, in talking to the father, who, and remember now she's come to a place where she has her own set of values and she understands the value, because she's now an adult. And in reflection, her hero, big, strong protector there, she knows what he used to do now, right? So, so there's all of that.
He understands him in a complete way. He's no longer this big daddy, human being with crazies.
And that is, there's still oftentimes there's still a manhood thing going on with the man. After all, that's who he is, and he no longer holds that status unless he sometimes pulls the economic strings. And even then, that is not enough for the woman who has come into her own and who at the same time has raised children. And so it's not unusual to hear the phrase, you think I'm your child? Spoken or unspoken, it's an interesting phase, especially if the woman experienced father absence in those developmental years, because a lot of the ideas as to how I'm going to live my life happen then, if I decide I'm going to get married, who I'm not going to get married to for sure. But oftentimes the strangest thing happens. And you find this man has traits like that other man. He's my father, and that there is also a real issue. Coming face to face with that man that you got married to, being almost like the man who raised you, who was absent at times.
And how does that problem manifest? Because I think sometimes we find ourselves in chaos and all kinds of things. And we don't know where it came from. And I'm guessing that it could be linked directly back to the absence or a bad presence.
Yeah.
Is that so?
Yeah, it is. And I mean, it follows the you know, the wide range, because there are some daughters who are in that situation who don't talk to their father anymore. Not because I don't like him, but I can't talk to him. You know, he's not taking me seriously. He says he'll do this and then he doesn't do that. You know, like so and but you know, they keep coming back even when they are absent. They say, I'm not talking to him anymore. This, you know, that there is still that link and that relationship that they, you know, it's just that it's almost as though I can't fix this. You know? No matter how I try to fix this, and I'm doing the best thing for him, you know, he's not getting it. So you know what? Do what you want. But that lasts a couple months sometimes. You know, what are you doing now? So it creates that kind of a conflict and that kind of a tension, because fathers feel it too. You know, so it's really a difficult stage. And then, as you stated earlier, if you add poor health to that on the father's part, you know, it becomes even more stressful. You know, it's a difficult stage.
It sounds like it's one of the things that just adds tension to the daughter's life. And tension, stress emerges as all kinds of things. Do you see that in your practice?
Yeah, you know, it certainly does do that. But you see, it does the same thing for the men as well, because they are petrified of losing that of losing that attention and that love, and they really and truly don't understand why. You know, I've had some situations where they genuinely don't understand why, you know, because, like, I mean, they know me, and not only that, you know, this is what this is how it always has been, you know, and they always look for who is influencing this girl, you know. And if mother is still around, trying her best to act as mediator through this, but strange thing happens, and you know, supporting the daughter through this, when she walks away and then comes back a few, you know, as I'm saying it, I'm seeing all of those situations that, that we've had to deal with. You know, it's a really difficult stage, and it takes a lot of patience and a lot of understanding of the process of aging, really, you know, and not just the physical part of it, because that's the easiest part to see, you know. Physical, you slow down a little bit, you know, like you're not well, you're gonna get more aches and pains. But what really happens is the mental process, as to, like, I am no longer relevant. That's big for the father, especially, you know. So I'm going to assert my relevance, which creates another situation. It's a difficult stage. But
I suppose life all around is impacted.
Yes, it does. It does.
I want us to start our discussion, and I want to invite Jennifer back in. So while I want to lead this off with my first question, which is, and Jennifer, you know, this is really an undercurrent kind of difference relationship that we are getting into. What are some of your thoughts?
Listening to Ian, what came to me is that definitely relationships like this with the fathers and their daughters we have to try and mend them from early, because I definitely can see the effects as we grow older and reach to the third act stage. And I just want to share, Ian, as you were speaking, I share a bit in my situation. And I see now as you speaking there that I have been very fortunate to grow up in a family with girls, 5 girls and 2 boys. And you did say where in our case, my father was protective in that to ensure that we, and I'm sharing this because I want to ask you a question here. He brought us up extremely independent, okay? And we were taught to take charge of our lives, not to depend on any man. If anybody touch us or speak to us in a certain way, he's there to protect us, to come and chat, tell him what is happening. So he was like clearly the protector of us right through. He taught the boys for total respect of us and respect in the way in those days to be always dressed properly in the house. You can't walk about with the underwear, neither can the girls, etc., etc. So the values and respect was very, very high. So I never even thought of what happens beyond a situation like ours, okay? Because we spoke a lot. Communication was very open, not about personal woman stuff, which you sent to your mother, as you quite rightly say, go to your mother. He ensured he never used violence against us. So my mother was the one to share, as we would say, share the licks, to discipline us, not him, because he felt as man, he was going to touch us. But what with all that, and I'm still up to today, my dad died at 93. My mom is still alive, but up to today, we always had a great relationship, and we looked forward to taking care of our father up until, and people remarked how we had a body. They never came to a funeral that was so happy and everything. But what I found, and I'm sharing this personally, and you mentioned something like that, and I'm saying this to women because it could affect you throughout your years, that I kept, and I believe my relationships didn't work because I was looking for the qualities of my father in the partner. And so in this scenario, yes, his mother and daughter, father and daughter, the father did like a protection, he was the protector and did everything. But to me, which was great, but somewhere along the line, I think it caused me to be the expectation that I had, I still have, I guess, of men, it wasn't real. So my question there is, yes, you need that communication to help build those relationships, and for the men who listening to understand how it's important it is to reach out to their daughters, and to the daughters to build and mend the relationship that was lost. But for those who may have had, like myself, that type of relationship with your father, which to me was positive, that expectation is what I concern about.
Yeah. I want to make a comment on that. That is what is referred to as classic well raised. You were well raised, and everything was in order, and everything was in place. And I think you're right. It impacts upon your relationships because that is how a relationship is supposed to be. And if it's not like that, then I don't want it. Or somehow I insist upon it, and whoever I'm insisting upon it and says, you see that I can't live with that.
Yeah.
What is important though for men to understand, I think, is that and we're talking personally. I could talk from my perspective personally as well. I tell my children all the little mistakes I made. And their mistakes, like they weren't mistakes at the time. It was glorious at the time.
Yeah.
These are the things that I do, and
you were having fun.
And I get the response, "Daddy, you did that?" And I say, "Yes," because that happens. You see,
Yeah.
when we don't say that, and if we don't share that, which is our vulnerabilities, you know, men sometimes if you share that, then you take them off the path, you know, and make them,
Yes.
if you don't share that, when your daughter goes into a relationship and she sees that, you know, she's like, oh, no, I don't want that. But if that is shared and she sees that, then that becomes part of her realm of understanding of relationships and men and the whole transition stuff and that takes place. And of course, there could be serious conversations around, you know, like, are you going to maintain and sustain that same thing that you did? But at least there's a conversation that makes you say that, like, this person is not flawed. You know, and because, you know, the thing about finding flaws is when you find one, you find a whole lot more in all different places, you know, and so I think it's and this comes back to the go talk to your mother about that.
Yeah.
You know, that sort of, you know, I don't recommend that you go talk to your mother about that. You know, I recommend that you hear from me what I have to say.
Yeah.
and I talk it through from a man's perspective, and then say, like, your mother might see things differently. You know, like, go talk to her about that. But, you know, the sort of you know, shepherding, you know, as soon as this thing comes, you know, the signal, you know, that's a girl thing, a woman thing. Also, I can't talk about that. That is you know, men have to rethink that. But talking about it is that you also have to understand who you're talking to, you know, and you pull your son aside and you would say, hey, you know what men say to their sons, in case you don't know, you know, or you may never have heard, but, you know, you talk differently to the sons, you know, so the son had that kind of like grounding kind of thing, you know. Well, you know, girls can hear some of that too, maybe with a certain amount of sensitivity.
Yes.
You know, and that balances, you know, what, you know, how what is a good man and what is not a good man. And it also says, you know, that men transform as they get older. You know what I mean? You know, like, for example, some men, you get a whole lot of, when they hit a certain age and stage, you know, like, your home with your wife, so you ain't going anywhere, you know, like, well, you know, the children see that too, you know, and you're going to talk about where that comes from, you know, and that doesn't make you a bad person, and that doesn't make you a bad example, because, you know, I've been there, I've been through that. That makes you even credible. You know, and that is where the sort of challenge is. You know, you know, on a personal level, I can't remember saying go talk to your mother about that. If you ask me, I'll tell you. Sometimes I would listen to the explanation and say, yeah, I have a different perspective than that. You know, here's how I see it, but let's find a place. You know, because then you become in charge. You know, and more balanced in your approach to things, because, you know, I mean, human relationships are flawed to start off with, you know, and grow with it.
Ian, is it, you know, I'm listening to you, and the fathers are avoiding talking to their daughters when they are developing about truth. So the daughters continue to have this image of daddy. And every man in their life is compared to daddy, whether they want to do it or not. If relationship was daddy was bad, sometimes they go into bad relationships. If it was good, no man could meet up to daddy. But I'm thinking of my own childhood and my own brother's relationship. My brother would have been talking to my mother. So he had a great relationship with her, talking and, you know, mother and son. But he also talked a lot with my father. So got that grounding, and that's, you know, does that create a problem where perhaps because men may not be willing to talk to children, to their daughters, let me say their daughters, even in adulthood, openly, to admit flaws, to admit the mistakes that they made, that leaves the woman again twice. In childhood, you had an illusion, and in adulthood, you have an illusion. And does that lead to confusion? Whereas the men go forward with more certainty because they've had both sides.
Yeah,
Is
well,
that
balance
a
is
fair
always,
statement?
you know, what I'm saying is they have a balance, you know, and women and mothers do fall into that little space too, you know, because like oftentimes they have had to accept that sort of thing, you know. so you know, the old saying, boys will be boys, you know what I mean? You know, I remember as a little guy growing up, you know, I'm fourth with four boys, the last of four boys in the family, you know. And I used to actually hear my mother say sometimes, you know, I tell them when I send out the cops, hide your hand, you know.
Yep.
You know,
Yep.
like, and I feel, you know, you're hearing all of that, and like, you know, so you're saying, oh, yeah, man, it's okay. There's a balance in this thing here. You know what I mean? But fathers, when they're talking to their daughters, you know, and they're setting this example, you know, and it's hard to find men who haven't been through that phase, and they, you know, and they can't live up to it. So they, you know, I mean, they literally go outside, you know,
Physically remove themselves.
Yeah, they remove themselves from it, you know, but they never forget that protective role. You know, I've had instances where people who have literally never grown up with their father's totally absent. But if something happened to the daughter at some time in adolescence or whatever, shows up and he says like, who is this? Where is this? And then he does what he has to do, and then he disappears again. You know, you know,
Yep.
it's that protective role that we have assumed, and you know, there's nothing wrong with it, quite frankly.
How does that affect a woman in, and I say this because we talk with fathers and daughters, now an established woman on the third act stage with all those issues, looking at life, seeing that your father's story is not the truth, is not all true. Everything that he's presented is not all true. You still have to develop the relationship. What kinds of consequences do we have coming out of that? Because the adult daughter has to deal with the father, probably knowing the whole story, but the father is continuing to present the quarter that he gave throughout life.
Yeah, well, at that point in time, the mother, who's still the companion, is a treasure. Because then she brings that balance. But oftentimes, if the relationship gets to a point where it's you know, the intervention is too late, you know, truth has to be there throughout. You know, it's if the intervention is too late, then mother at that point in time finds themselves as peacemaker. You know, and the peacemaker role, you know, like, yes, you get little tidbits of, you know, what your father used to do, and never mind it, because let me tell you, you know, but the main thing in the mother's mind is to how do I, you know, pour these oil over troubled waters so that my daughter and my husband, her father, and this relationship, and how do I fix that? And that is that too is a challenge, you know, that women have at that stage, because, you know, I often hear when they speak to that, I often hear like, why did you put up with that? It's almost like, was this thing a big lie? And it wasn't. You know, but like, is that what it is? Because you're talking about a mature person now who's saying, you know, almost like feeling deceived all this time, you know. So what I thought was so great wasn't really so great after all, you know. And there's something that is, you know, disillusional about that, you know. It's a complex relationship at that stage.
Yeah, and in some situations, the mothers growing up, the mothers now protect their daughters by not telling them the truth. You mentioned truth just now, about the truth of their fathers. So the daughters also, even if it's an absentee father, I remember early days growing up, some friends will tell you, you know, you ask them, they will say their father living overseas. So I even had a friend who told her son at the time, because of the relationship she had at the time she was pregnant, that his father died, you know. So there are the situations where women may not tell the truth to their daughters, as we're talking daughters here, about whether their father, whatever situation with father, even
their father or who?
yeah, or who, or even to the extent. And I must admit, at a stage in my life, my ex-husband has died. So I think I could share this and my daughter would just forgive me. But I remembered when we were divorced, I always, because as I mentioned, my background, this positive image of the man, and I always ensured that my daughter maintained, well, I say daughters, I have two daughters, maintained that relationship with the father. Although he had a lot of, well, I saw a lot of faults in terms of not being as responsible that I felt he should be, I would ensure when it coming to any occasion, the birthday, the Christmas and thing, he and I will buy a gift, wrap it with a card and put from your dad, because no way I wanted her to see him in any negative light, because he had his positives, right? So I discussed the aspect that I felt that was very apparent, right? But I played down a lot, and again, up to this day, and I am happy, I have no regrets doing that, because she was able to build a very good relationship with him, you know, communication, etc. Because I feel as I covered up. I don't know if that was good or not, but
I think that's,
there are situations I know of that like that.
I don't see that as a cover up. I see that as as focusing on your daughter's development and understanding of life. At some point in time, she has to know the truth, though. At an age and stage where she could understand that that was the truth, and this is why it was done, and this is, you know, and another age and stage they say you lied to me or whatever, you know, because you know.
And you agree, I agree with you. She followed, but it wasn't a negative.
Wasn't traumatic.
It wasn't traumatic because she was able to discuss it with him. And he, whatever he told her, I didn't go to say that's not true or not. I left that conversation. I left them with their conversation.
Yeah, that conversation probably went something like this. Let me tell you some things about me and your mother.
Yeah. I'm sure.
See that you're adult now and you can handle this stuff.
Yes.
Let me tell you some things. You know what I mean?
Your mother not perfect. She wasn't perfect.
She was, you know, but at that point in time, you know, the daughter hopefully is balanced enough to understand that, okay, I understand what this is, but I know who I am, and this is how I will proceed. You know, and
yeah, okay.
This is what I bring to it. You know, so it wasn't really, it wasn't really deception. It was so that I could understand this about life, and I could understand that. You know, and that sort of, because the processing will be done. There's no doubt, because there has to be the processing to see, was I deceived, or why did this happen? You know, why was it so? And you know, so which is why I say there's nothing wrong with that, because what you've done is you brought a certain sort of stability and sustained self-esteem. Okay. You know, I am of worth. You know what I mean? And also worthy of whatever you chose to do at the time. You know, so it's not. I suppose, you know, if you look at it, you could say, well, was that deceiving? And I would say, Yeah, well, as an adult and as a mother, you made an executive decision, which you were able to explain in and as to why, and the relationship was still sustained with your daughter and your father. I would suppose, even if it's not sustained, at least now you know truth at some point in it. I mean, that's how I see it.
I'm looking at us with 6 minutes to go, and I want to get to the stage of how can this be reconciled? Because I could give the example opposite, and I really commend Jennifer in terms of how she handled that. But I would say that in my family, in front of my face, you have some realities. Like every time I hear my father say, I have 4 children, I laugh. And every time I hear my mother say, we have 4 children, I laugh because I know you have 6 children. So, but the stories, and I developed a relationship with the other 2 that them to this day. And I don't care, but I think it's silly. Can fathers, is there...
Just that you say you don't care. I want to talk about that at some point in time.
No, I mean, I think it's silly what they're carrying on with. I think it's silly. So I don't bother.
Is what you did.
Yeah. We could talk about that in your next visit. But I think is it possible for fathers and daughters to reconcile these tensions? Because somehow I think it's going to make life on the 3rd act better, especially if both of them are on the 3rd act stage still, and women don't carry those issues. How is the reconciliation to come about?
Like truth without blame, I mean, all of us have our quote unquote flaws, which are not really flaws, just things that we do, things that we did, and there's no, I mean, if the truth is known as to why we did that, truth without blame is basically what it is, taking responsibility for it and basically saying, at this time, this is what I thought, and talking the truth, and a lot of the time when that conversation takes place, it's almost like presenting excuses.
Yeah.
As to why I did it. I mean, I'm not talking about excuses when I say truth. I'm saying, like some of the things that you're sitting there, I tell my children is that, like, because I have Canadian children and I brought them down to Trinidad. So rather than somebody else tell them, I tell them first,
Yeah.
So the things that they heard and they did hear, it's like, people, how we are. Your father, is your father, and they felt very assured that they knew that. Yeah. And they would come back and say this. I heard so there's us, and there are no excuses, because there could be regrets, I really shouldn't have done that, but I did it, but I'm not doing that anymore because this is it's an ongoing conversation right into the 3rd act, as you call it, and the conversation doesn't end. You know what I mean? The conversation, it's a rite of passage, because at some point in time, your children are going to have those kinds of conversations with you.
Yeah.
And that consciousness in and of itself is good to have and to explore. Like my son would say something, I say, well, let me tell you a story. Not to negate his story. That's important, not to negate his, but to say, me too. And you go through, but fact is, you don't live like that now, do you? You know what I mean? And that kind of examination, that's how the growth takes place, because, as I tell people sometimes in my counseling, the most liberating feeling that I ever had with my children is particularly my daughter, is when she said, like, I don't agree with that at age 14, and she told me why. I exhaled. Finally, Superman is just a man now. Good.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
freedom, free at last, free at last. I almost said it like Martin Luther from the mountaintops. But yeah, that's the beginning of the relationship.
Yeah.
At another stage of development, you know, and I value that. And the fact that I valued that said that, like, hey, listen, I have my opinion and it's valued, you know, and so we disagree from time to time now.
Mm.
And it's
Yeah,
okay.
I have to really thank you for, I think this is the start of a discussion.
Yes.
I think this is the start of a discussion because in Connections 50 Plus, Jennifer and I always say, you see, the start of anything, you have to be very real and true and honest with where am I? Who am I? And even though you know something is not right, be aware of it. You might decide not to fix it, but be aware of it. And this issue of, you know, you could always talk about men and what they do. It's in front of you and obvious, but there's so many tensions that come out of father-daughter that go through childhood into adolescence, young adulthood, and we carrying it onto the third act into old age.
Yeah.
And as you said, messing up and continuing the legacy with our children. We've just started the discussion. I want to really thank you for putting this perspective forward. And you're definitely going to be back again. You're definitely going to be back again. Jennifer?
I just said thanks. Yeah, and actually, what I shared before, I never saw it as a issue, but it came to me, yeah. That is why I'm looking for this perfect person.
So
on the that stage, which you know what I mean? So I have to remove that. I wouldn't find it on the to that stage. Thank you, Ian. Really, no, very great conversation.
Yeah, and I look forward to the continuation of the conversation.
Oh, definitely.
So
Yeah.
that's legacy, right? And that's how that's how we change things.
Jennifer,
Yes.
what a conversation.
And Terry, and I am so happy that we can have these conversations on our show, because where else, and I remember Maureen said that last week, where else would people hear conversations like this? Because it's real, and it's affecting our lives, and definitely it's affecting us throughout on the third stage. And if we can help, it's not too late for us to discuss with our grandchildren or our adult children about these situations. And so we need to keep, and we say it all the time, examine ourselves. As Ian spoke, I was checking myself also and say, oh, by now I supposed to know this. But still, when you hear it in a different way and you say, okay, that's why. And that is why Terry and both of us do the same. We openly share.
Yeah.
You know, because in us sharing, others, you all out there, you could relate to what we are saying. And you make that, as we say, you make that connection.
Yeah. And everywhere, what we're saying on the third act, we can release all the baggage of the first and second act so that we can really enjoy the third act. Then
it makes a difference.
It is what it is. So thank you, Ian Jeffers. So Jennifer, let's get on to going forward. So people,
definitely
hold your horses, because we're getting into now being in tribe, and we have some really fantastic news for you. Great. So Jennifer,
yes,
our tribe, it's time for us to get back together. Jennifer.
So yes, it's a great feeling, and now we're all excited about what is coming up, how we're celebrating emancipation.
Because emancipation is coming, we are open, and we have decided, hello, it is time for us to try to get together. And we know we can't do more than 5 people, but we're still getting together. So Jennifer, what we doing?
So we are having our emancipation celebration. So we have a musician and a drummer, a very famous musician and a drummer.
Everybody here is established, has track record. And they are the 5.8G cohort.
So yes, and we have pianist. We do have a saxophonist.
Excellent.
Yeah. We have
A
author.
saxophonist from a big band.
Yes.
With a
Well,
big
everybody here from a big band, by the way. Everybody come.
Musician, drummer,
Every single one.
big band.
Pianist, big band. Everybody big band. Right? We have the Kaiso is more rapso.
Yes, we have an author.
Yes.
Yes. Then we have a very famous and known comedian and storyteller who will have us rippling. And we have another one really good with the guitar and extempo. We're not talking about vaccine or quarantine or lockdown. We
really celebrating emancipation. Yes.
And of course, I mean, between the saxophonists and so on, we having a real crooner with the old ballads, a real vocalist who can really croon. So you'll pick up and you'll do your two-step across the floor and so on.
And guess what? Guess what? I don't know. She hasn't convinced me yet, you know. But we thinking we should do some sort of act. Now I can't sing, huh? I can't play music.
And I pretend I can sing.
I can talk.
So people, our tribe, our community, next week, big concert. 50 plus 5.8G Alive Emancipation Concert. So dress up in your emancipation clothes and come out. We're going to have a ball and keep track. You'll hear all the information.
Right. So that's our show on the 28th, is it?
Yes.
Great.
Great.
Yes.
Good. What a show. What a show.
We want to thank you, for being with us on our 5.8G Alive show. And see you next week.
Look out for the show. Next week is concert. So clear the floor. Clear the floor. Get room to move and to carry on. And who knows? You might see Jennifer and I performing. So
bye.
50 Plus Tribe and follow us from Trinidad and Tobago and the Caribbean.
Thank you for joining us on this Connections 50 Plus 5.8G Alive show.
We hope you enjoyed the lively conversation and look forward to seeing you next week.
Don't forget to like our Facebook page and subscribe to our YouTube channel.
We really love getting your feedback. Bye for now.